Let's get started. In this one, we are covering the fully amended Nbfc, that is the non-banking financial company. तो हम currently जो है वो क्या कर रहे हैं, हम डिस्कस कर रहे हैं Nbfc which is relevant for, हम क्या बोल रहे हैं, that the same is relevant for May 2025. पीसी का थोड़ा स्मूथ चल. तो करंटली जो है हम एनबीएफसी डिस्कस कर रहे हैं. Currently we are discussing a topic that is the non-banking, that is what, that is the non-banking financial company, that is the NBFC. So after studying this chapter, we all student will be able to understand that definition क्या है, regulations क्या है. तो this is मतलब NBFC में काफी ज़्यादा amendment आई है. So this is the amended PDF of ICM. तो directly एक बार institute से पढ़ते हैं and then we will switch to faculty for better retention purpose. तो आफ्टर स्टार्टिंग दिस चैप्टर वी ऑल स्टूडेंट विल बी एबल टू, हम क्या कर पाएंगे, हम अंडरस्टैंड कर पाएंगे इस चैप्टर को. वी विल बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड डेफिनेशन क्या है, हम क्या बोलेंगे डेफिनेशन क्या है, डेफिनेशन क्या है, रेगुलेशन क्या है, टाइप्स क्या है एनबीएफसी के, डिफरेंस बिटवीन बैंक और एनबीएफसी में क्या डिफरेंस है. वी विल गेन द नॉलेज ऑफ प्रूडेंशियल नॉर्म्स, कौन कौन से ऐसे प्रूडेंशियल नॉर्म्स है, कैपिटल रिक्वायरमेंट्स क्या है, इनकम रिकॉग्निशन क्या है, प्रोविजनिंग रिक्वायरमेंट्स क्या है. हम लर्न कर पाएंगे ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स को, ऑडिट चेकलिस्ट को जो भी एनबीएफसी के लिए है. फिर हम अप्लाई कर पाएंगे, एनालिस कर पाएंगे द अबाउट मेंशन कंसेप्ट इन मॉडरेटली कॉम्प्लेक्स सिनेरियोज में. उसके बाद ऑडिट ऑफ एनबीएफसी. ऑडिट ऑफ एनबीएफसी में क्या आता है, डेफिनेशन, रजिस्ट्रेशन एंड रेगुलेशन क्या है, ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स क्या है, ऑडिट चेकलिस्ट क्या है, ऑडिटर की ड्यूटी क्या है, ऑडिटर की रिपोर्ट्स क्या है. अब ये दे रखा है कि सीए सचिव जो है उसे पॉइंट किया है एज अ स्टैट्यूटरी ऑडिटर ऑफ एन एनबीएफसी. हाउ इंपॉर्टेंट आर एनबीएफसी इन फाइनेंशियल सिस्टम ऑफ अ लार्ज एंड डाइवर्स कंट्री एज इंडिया. Part of the country's financial service sectors, NBFC cater to variety customer in rural and urban areas, thus promote करता है inclusive growth. Such entity have become an important source of credit for those segment of society which cannot meet strict requirements of banks for lending purpose. They are popularly in the area of housing finance, financing for commercial vehicles, microfinance industry, MSME sectors, and in other areas. And how does an NBFC differ from a bank? Although NBFC lend like a bank, they cannot accept demand deposit and are not a part of a payment and settlement system like banks. As a part of understanding NBFC, such it found such entity to be strictly regulated. They have to obtain certificate of registration to commence business of NBFC का बिजनेस करने के लिए उन्हें क्या करना पड़ेगा, what they need to do is to obtain a certificate of registration का सर्टिफिकेट चाहिएगा of non-banking financial institution. These are the RBI directions and norms on acceptance of a public deposit, capital adequacy, risk exposure and other measures. कैसे आप monitor करोगे financial solvency and reporting को. NBFC are also subject to regulatory norms for asset classification, provisioning, income recognition as per the directions of RBI. NBFC having applicability of Ind AS are also required to consider principle of relevant Ind AS in the preparation of financial statement. उसके बाद हम बोल रहे हैं कि ये इसकी रिक्वायरमेंट है किस लिए कि हम कंसिडर कर पाए प्रिंसिपल ऑफ रेलेवेंट इंडेक्स इन द प्रिपरेशन ऑफ फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट. इन फैक्ट financial statement of an NBFC having applicability of Ind AS are required to be prepared in accordance with Division 3 of Schedule 3 of the Companies Act 2013. Audit approach to an NBFC has to take into account all such issues. He was also checking for regulatory updates in NBFC. As a part of understanding it, he became aware of applicability of scale-based regulation defining NBFC on the basis of their size, activity and perceived riskiness into four layers: base layer, middle layer, upper layer. So there are four layers. हम क्या बोलते हैं, NBFC on the basis of their size, activity, perceived riskiness into the four layers. There are what? There are how many layers? There are four layers, and the layers are, how many layers are there? So these are the layer: base layer, then there is a middle layer, upper layer and the top layer. तो हम क्या बोलते हैं, how many layers are there? तो चार लेयर है, हमने बोला है कि चार लेयर है: बेस लेयर, मिडिल लेयर, अपर लेयर, टॉप लेयर. तो यहाँ पे हम लिखते भी जाते हैं कि ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ रिस्कीनेस के बेसिस पे बोला है. फोर लेयर आर देयर and these are what? These are base layer, middle layer, upper layer and top layer. उसके बाद whereas upper layer comprises of NBFC specifically identified by RBI for enhanced. upper layer को बोला गया है कि हम क्या बोल रहे हैं कि जो upper layer है, फिर हमने बोला कि जो upper layer है that comprises NBFC specifically identified by RBI for enhanced regulatory requirement. टॉप लेयर वुड, तो देर आर फोर लेयर. हमने तो ये बात की थी कि फोर लेयर है. फोर लेयर में कौन सी लेयर है? बेस लेयर है, मिडिल लेयर है, अपर लेयर है, टॉप लेयर है. तो हम क्या बोलते हैं, चार लेयर है. चार लेयर में कौन कौन सी लेयर है? बेस लेयर, मिडिल लेयर, अपर लेयर और टॉप लेयर. तो अपर लेयर को कुछ और बोला है कि दिस इज फॉर दी for enhanced regulatory requirement, whereas top layer would ideally remain empty unless RBI is of the opinion that there is a substantial increase in potential systematic risk from a specific NBFC in upper layer. Not in upper layer published by RBI. He was trying to confirm classification of this very auditee company in accordance with such regulation, sensing that there was increased responsibility of an auditor of NBFC in view of various RBI directions. Then he tweaked his audit approach accordingly. Not only auditor of NBFC is required to report to shareholder, he is also responsible for making an additional report to the board of directors of a company on a certain specified matter in accordance with the RBI directions. उसके बाद हम बोल रहे हैं इंट्रोडक्शन. तो ये ठीक है, हमने ये तो पैरा दिया था, वो एसेट्स पढ़ने का तो नहीं है बट फिर भी रीड किया है. उसके बाद कमिंग टू द इंट्रोडक्टरी पार्ट, दैट इज द इंट्रोडक्शन व्हिच इज रिलेटिंग टू द एनबीएफसी. तो हम क्या बोलते हैं, नॉन बैंकिंग फाइनेंस कंपनी. जो एनबीएफसी है, दैट इज द नॉन बैंकिंग फाइनेंस कंपनी. Sector has evolved considerably in terms of its size, operation, technological sophistication, and entry into new areas of financial service and product. NBFC are now deeply interconnected with the entities in the financial sector on both sides of their balance sheets. Being financial entity, they are exposed to risk arising out of counterparty failures, the funding and asset concentration, interest rate movement, and risk pertaining to liquidity and solvency as any other financial sector player. At the same time, there are segments within the sector that do not pose any significant risk to the system. So this is NBFC. Then how there will be the audit of NBFC. Definition, हम क्या बोलते हैं, that what will be the definition क्या होगी NBFC की. Of Reserve Bank of India 1997 defines a non-banking financial company as a financial institution, जो कि हम क्या बोलते हैं, एक NBFC, एक नॉन बैंकिंग, एक जो नॉन बैंकिंग फाइनेंशियल कंपनी होती है, वो एक ऐसा फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशन होता है जो कि कंपनी होता है. नॉन बैंकिंग इंस्टीट्यूशन विच इज अ कंपनी एंड विच हैज इट्स प्रिंसिपल बिजनेस द रिसीविंग ऑफ डिपॉजिट. रिसीव करना डिपॉजिट्स को, रिसीव करना डिपॉजिट्स को, रिसीव करना डिपॉजिट्स को अंडर एनी स्कीम और अरेंजमेंट और इन एनी अदर मैनर और lending in any manner. Such other non-banking institution or class of such institution as a bank may, with the previous approval of the central government, by notification in the official gazette, specify करेगी that what will be the non-banking financial institution क्या होगा. Non-banking financial institution carry out करती है financing activity, but their resources are not directly obtained from the saver as a debt. Instead, this institution mobilize करती है the public saving for rendering other financial services, including investments. All such institutions are financial intermediaries when they lend. They are known as NBFC, non-banking financial intermediary, NBFIs, or investment institution, that is Unit Trust of India, Life Insurance Corporation, General Insurance Corporation. Further, in order to identify a particular company as a non-banking finance company, it will consider both asset and income pattern as evidence from the last audited balance sheet of the company to decide its principal business. The company will be treated as NBFC when the company financial assets constitute more than 50% of the, हम क्या बोलते हैं यहाँ पे हमने बात की है किस कंडीशन की, where there is a more than 50%, तो हम क्या बोल रहे हैं, where there is a more than 50%. जब हम क्या बोलते हैं more than 50% of the total assets, more than हम क्या बोलते हैं, that is what हम क्या बोलते हैं, that is more than 50% of the total asset, more than 50% of total asset, that is netted off by intangible asset. More than 50% हम क्या बोलते हैं, more than 50% of the total asset, that is netted off by intangible asset. And income from financial asset constitute more than 50% of the gross income. A company which fulfill both the criteria shall qualify करेगी as NBFC and would require to registered by NBFC, मतलब as a NBFC by RBI. तो हम क्या बोलते हैं, that where there is a more than 50% of total asset of intangible asset, income from financial asset constitute, हम क्या बोलते हैं, फाइनेंशियल एसेट, कंपनीज फाइनेंशियल एसेट कंस्टिट्यूट मोर देन 50% ऑफ टोटल एसेट हो. और इनकम जो है, एक तो हम क्या बोल रहे हैं कि जहां कंपनी के फाइनेंशियल एसेट, जहां कंपनी के जो फाइनेंशियल एसेट है वो कितने होने चाहिए, मोर देन 50% होने चाहिए ऑफ टोटल एसेट. कंपनी के फाइनेंशियल एसेट मोर देन 50% होने चाहिए. हम क्या बोलते हैं, कंपनी के फाइनेंशियल एसेट मोर देन 50% होने चाहिए. और जो इनकम है फ्रॉम फाइनेंशियल एसेट, और जो भी कंपनी की इनकम होगी, जो भी कंपनी की इनकम होगी फाइनेंशियल एसेट कंस्टिट्यूट, वो कितना होगा, दैट विल बी मोर देन 50% ऑफ ग्रॉस इनकम. तो हम क्या बोलते हैं कि कंपनी के जो फाइनेंशियल एसेट वो मोर देन होने चाहिए, कितने मोर देन होने चाहिए, 50% ऑफ टोटल एसेट्स. और कंपनी की जो इनकम है वो फ्रॉम फाइनेंशियल एसेट मोर देन होने चाहिए 50% ऑफ द ग्रॉस इनकम. तो हम बोलते हैं कि तब क्या होगा, एनबीएफसी हो जाएगी और उसे रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना होगा बाय द आरबीआई. किसके थ्रू, बाय द आरबीआई. देन आता है हमारा रजिस्ट्रेशन एंड रेगुलेशन ऑफ एनबीएफसी. कैसे रजिस्ट्रेशन एंड रेगुलेशन होगा एनबीएफसी का. Under Section 45 IA of the Reserve Bank of India Act 1934, no non-banking financial company is allowed to commence or carry on the business of non-banking financial institutions without obtaining a certificate of registration, which is issued by the Reserve Bank of India and having the net on fund of 25 lakh. Obtain करना होगा सर्टिफिकेट जो कि इशू किया जाएगा बाय द रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया एंड जिसका नेट ऑन फंड होगा 25 लाख, जिसका हम क्या बोलते हैं कि चलो ठीक है सर्टिफिकेट रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना होगा, ये सब तो ठीक है। किससे लेना होगा? रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया। तो हमने ये तो पता चल गया कि आरबीआई से लेना पड़ेगा। उसके बाद हैविंग द नेट ऑन फंड, जिसका नेट ऑन फंड हम क्या बोलते हैं, जिसका नेट ऑन फंड, जिसका नेट ऑन फंड क्या होता है 25 लाख रुपी, जिसका नेट ऑन फंड कितना होता है 25 लाख रुपी और सच अदर अमाउंट नॉट एक्सीडिंग 100 करोड़। 25 लाख रुपी और सच अदर अमाउंट और जो कि एक्सीड नहीं कर रहा हो, which is not exceeding 100 करोड़ रुपी से ज्यादा एक्सीड नहीं कर रहा हो, as the bank by notification in the official gazette specified, provided that the bank may notify different amount of net on fund for different categories of NBFC. आरबीआई ने नोटिफाई किया है डिफरेंट अमाउंट ऑफ नेट ऑन फंड फॉर डिफरेंट कैटेगरीज ऑफ एनबीएफसी इंक्लूडिंग ₹2 करोड़ फॉर सर्टेन, हम क्या बोलते हैं ₹2 करोड़ फॉर सर्टेन categories of NBFC. For certain categories, companies currently applying for registration as an NBFC. The minimum net on fund requirement कितनी है? Minimum net on fund requirement है that is 10 करोड़. Minimum net on fund requirement कितनी है? 10 करोड़. Previously it was, पहले कितनी थी? पहले मिनिमम थी 2 करोड़ और अब कितनी है? 10 करोड़. मिनिमम नेट ऑन फंड में भी हायर डिपेंडिंग ऑन द स्पेसिफिक टाइप ऑफ एनबीएफसी. तो मिनिमम फंड रिक्वायरमेंट कितनी है? पहले जो है वो 2 करोड़ थी और अब जो है वो 10 करोड़ है. पहले जो मिनिमम रिक्वायरमेंट थी, पहले जो मिनिमम रिक्वायरमेंट थी ऑफ नेट ऑन फंड की वो 2 करोड़ थी, नाउ अब 10 करोड़ है. RBI has prescribed a timeline to meet net on fund amount of rupees 10 करोड़. हमें net on fund चाहिएगा कितना? 10 करोड़ चाहिएगा in a phased manner for certain categories of existing NBFC by 31st March 2027. However, for NBFC P2B, NBFC AA and NBFC with no public funds and no customer interface, the net on fund shall constitute to be rupees 2 crore. For NBFC, IFC, NBFC this and net on fund shall be rupees 300 crore. एक कंपनी जो है वो अगर इनकॉर्पोरेट हुई है अंडर द कंपनीज एक्ट एंड डिजायरस ऑफ कमेंसिंग बिजनेस ऑफ एनबीएफसी as defined under section 45A जो कि 45 IA of RBI Act 1934 में डिफाइंड है. हम क्या बोलते हैं? जो कि डिफाइंड है अंडर सेक्शन 45 IA of the RBI Act 1934 कैन अप्लाई करती है टू द रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया इन अ प्रिस्क्राइब फॉर्म which is along with the necessary document for registration. The RBI issue करेगा certificate of registration after satisfying itself that the condition as enumerated in जो भी enumerated है under section 45 IA of the RBI Act 1934, under which section जो भी रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया has issued directions to the non-banking financial companies on acceptance of a public deposit, prudential norms like capital adequacy ratio, income recognition, asset classification, provision for bad debt, bad and doubtful debt, risk exposure norms, and other means to monitor the financial solvency and reporting by NBFC. Directions were also issued to auditors to report non-compliance with the RBI and the regulation to the RBI. Board of Directors and the shareholder RBI has also issued the Fair Practice Code to be adopted by all the NBFC while doing lending business. The guidelines inter alia cover general principle on adequate disclosure on the terms and conditions of a loan and also adopting a non-coercive recovery method. What are the type of NBFC compliance in regulatory perspective क्या है? In terms of section 45I of the RBI Act that is amended जो भी है 1997, नॉन बैंकिंग फाइनेंशियल कंपनीज कंपनी जो कि रजिस्टर्ड होती है अंडर द कंपनीज एक्ट 1956 और 2013 जो कि रिसेंटली है, engage in the business of loans in advance, acquisition of shares, stock, bond, debentures, security issued by the government or security or local authority or other marketable security of a like nature, leasing, hire purchase, insurance business, चिट बिजनेस. तो एनबीएफसी का क्या काम है? लाइक नेचर क्या है? दैट इज the like nature, leasing, hire purchase, insurance business, chit business. but it does not include any institution whose principal business is that of agriculture activity, industrial activity, purchase or sale of any goods other than securities, or providing any service and sale, purchase, construction of immovable property. A non-banking institution which is a company and has a principal business of receiving deposits under any scheme or arrangement is in a one lump sum or installment by way of contribution or any manner, and is also a non-banking financial company, residuary of non-banking company. NBFC mandated to register under RBI. NBFC register जो भी होती है with RBI are categorized as follows. In terms deposit acceptance or otherwise into deposit. तो एनबीएफसी को कैसे क्लासिफाई किया जाता है? एनबीएफसी को क्लासिफाई किया जाता है आरबीआई के द्वारा एनबीएफसी को क्लासिफाई किया जाता है आरबीआई के द्वारा एज अ डिपॉजिट एक्सेप्टेंस, एज अ डिपॉजिट एक्सेप्टेंस इनटू एनबीएफसी डी और एनबीएफसी एंड डी. नॉन डिपॉजिट टेकिंग एनबीएफसी बाय देयर साइज इनटू बेस लेयर. हम बोलते हैं कि नॉन डिपॉजिट जो एनबीएफसी एनडी है, नॉन डिपॉजिट टेकिंग है, एनबीएफसी एनडी है, नॉन डिपॉजिट टेकिंग साइज इनटू उसको बेस लेयर, मिडिल लेयर, अपर लेयर और टॉप लेयर में किया है. बेस लेयर, मिडिल लेयर, अपर लेयर, हम क्या बोलते हैं, चार लेयर में क्लासिफाई किया है. बेस लेयर, देन मिडिल लेयर, देन अपर लेयर, देन टॉप लेयर. तो हम क्या बोलते हैं, चार कैटेगरीज में क्लासिफाई किया है इनटू द फोर लेयर्स: टॉप लेयर, अपर लेयर, middle layer, base layer, by the kind of activity they conduct. Within the categorization mentioned above, by the kind of activity they conduct, the different types of NBFC are as follow. इन्वेस्टमेंट एंड क्रेडिट कंपनी क्या है? इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर फाइनेंस कंपनी क्या है? कोर इन्वेस्टमेंट कंपनी क्या है? इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेट फंड. नॉन बैंकिंग फाइनेंशियल कंपनी क्या है? नॉन बैंकिंग फाइनेंशियल कंपनी माइक्रो फाइनेंस इंस्टीट्यूशन, नॉन बैंकिंग फाइनेंशियल कंपनी फैक्टर्स, एनबीएफसी नॉन ऑपरेटिव होल्डिंग कंपनी, एंड एसेट फाइनेंस कंपनी, इन्वेस्टमेंट कंपनी, लोन कंपनी, मॉर्टगेज गारंटी कंपनी एक्सेट्रा. व्हाट आर द टाइप्स ऑफ एनबीएफसी क्या है? ऑल एनबीएफसी आर आइदर या तो डिपॉजिट टेकिंग होती है, या तो वो डिपॉजिट लेती है, या तो वो डिपॉजिट टेकिंग होती है, या फिर वो नॉन डिपॉजिट टेकिंग होती है. इफ दे आर नॉन डिपॉजिट टेकिंग, एनडी इज सफिक्स टू देयर नेम, एनबीएफसी एनडी. अगर वो इफ दे आर नॉन डिपॉजिट, अगर वो या तो वो डिपॉजिट टेकिंग होती है या नॉन डिपॉजिट टेकिंग होती है. अगर वो नॉन डिपॉजिट टेकिंग है तो हम उसे सिंपली क्या बोलते हैं? एनबीएफसी एनडी, यानी कि एनबीएफसी नॉन डिपॉजिट टेकिंग. उसके बाद हम क्या बोलते हैं? कंपनी एग्जाम्प्टेड फ्रॉम रजिस्ट्रेशन अंडर आरबीआई. Companies that do financial business but are regulated by other regulators are given specific exemption by the Reserve Bank from its regulatory requirement for avoiding duty or regulation. Following NBFC have been exempted from the requirement of registration under 40 section 45 IA. 45 IA क्या है? Of the RBI Act 1934 subject to certain conditions. Housing finance institution regulated by National Housing Bank. Merchant banking company regulated by Security and Exchange Board of India. Stock exchange regulated by Security and Exchange Board of India. Company engaged in the business of stock broking, sub-broking regulated by Security and Exchange Board of India. Venture capital, जो venture capital fund companies होती है, which is regulated by Security and Exchange Board of India. Nidhi company regulated by Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India. Insurance company regulated by Insurance Regulatory IRDA. कंपनीज दैट डू, हम क्या बोलते हैं? कंपनी जो कि क्या करती है? कंपनीज दैट डू, जो कि फाइनेंशियल बिजनेस करती है बट आर रेगुलेटेड बाय अदर रेगुलेटर्स, आर गिवन स्पेसिफिक एग्जाम्पशंस. कंपनी दैट डू फाइनेंशियल बिजनेस बट आर रेगुलेटेड बाय अदर रेगुलेटर्स आर गिवन स्पेसिफिक एग्जाम्पशन बाय द आरबीआई फ्रॉम इट्स रेगुलेटरी requirements for avoiding duty of regulation. Following NBFC have been exempted from requirement of registration under section 45 IA of the RBI 1934, that is subject to certain conditions. उसके बाद हम बोल रहे हैं जैसे कि हाउसिंग फाइनेंस इंस्टीट्यूशन विच इज रेगुलेटेड बाय नेशनल हाउसिंग फाइनेंस. Merchant banking company regulated by Security and Exchange Board of India. Stock exchange regulated by Security and Exchange Board of India. Company engage in the business of, हम क्या बोलते हैं, company जो कि engage होती है in the business of stock broking, sub broking, जो भी regulated है by the, तो हम क्या बोलते हैं, जो भी regulated है वो companies who engage in the business of stock broking, sub broking, regulated by Security and Exchange Board of India. Venture Capital Fund regulated by Security and Exchange Board of India. Nidhi Company regulated by Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India. Insurance Company regulated by Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority. Chit Fund as it defined in Clause 2 of Chit Fund Act. Specified Microfinance Company. Securitization and Reconstruction Company. Mutual Benefit Companies. Core Investment Companies. What will be the alternative investment fund companies? Core investment company जिसकी asset size होती है less than 100 करोड़. Core investment company जिसकी core investment company हम क्या बोलते हैं, core investment company जिसकी asset size होती है less than 100 करोड़ and those asset size of 100 crore and above not accessing public funds are exempted from registration with the RBI. Pursuant to the announcement of scale-based regulation, a revised regulatory framework for NBFC on 22nd October 2021 to be effective from this, RBI has revised different facets of existing NBFC classification and regulation like capital requirement, government standards, prudential regulation, etc. based on 4 layers. ये based होते हैं 4 layers पे. These are based on 4 layers. Are defined on their size, activity and perceived riskiness. The 4 layers इतनी बार आ गया कि हमें खुद को याद हो गया कि बेस लेयर, मिडिल लेयर, अपर लेयर, टॉप लेयर, तो ये तो हमें याद हो ही गया है. स्टडी मटेरियल से पढ़ने का ये एडवांटेज है कि हमें बिना याद किए भी याद हो जाता है, बिकॉज इंस्टीट्यूट एक ही चीज़ों को इतनी बार रिपीट कर देता है कि हमें याद करने की क्या ज़रूरत है, इंस्टीट्यूट खुद हमें याद करा देता है. The top layer is ideally expected to be empty. Top layer हम मानते हैं empty है and will be filled by RBI based on the required need. Detail of NBFC populating the various layer is mentioned below. तो top layer तो होती है empty, जो कि fill की जाएगी. Top layer जो है ideally expected to be empty. ये कैसी होती है? Top layer is ideally expected. Top layer is ideally expected to be empty and will be filled by, कौन fill करेगा? by Reserve Bank of India जो है वो fill कर देगा. Detail of NBFC populating the various layers is mentioned below. फिर आ जाते हैं हम base layer पे. Base layer क्या है? जो भी base layer होती है that shall comprises the NBFC, हम क्या बोलते हैं, NBFC non deposit taking below the asset size of 1000 करोड़. An NBFC undertaking the following activity: NBFC peer-to-peer lending platform, NBFC aggregator, non-operative financial holding company, NBFC not availing public funds and not having any customer interface. तो ये सारी चीजें हमारी हो जाती है. उसके बाद आता है हमारा मिडिल लेयर. मिडिल लेयर क्या होता है? व्हाट विल बी मिडिल लेयर? मिडिल लेयर कंसिस्ट ऑफ ऑल डिपॉजिट NBFC D irrespective of size. Non-deposit taking NBFC with asset size of 1000 crore above. NBFC undertaking the following activity, जिसका stand alone primary dealers हो, infrastructure debt fund, non-banking financial company, core investment companies, housing finance company and infrastructure finance company. Then what will be the upper layer? Upper layer क्या होगी? The upper layer shall comprise of those NBFC which are specifically identified by the Reserve Bank as warranting enhancing regulatory requirement based on a set of parameter and scoring methodology as provided for detailed circular. Scan the QR code given in the key takeaways. The top 10 eligible NBFC in terms of their asset size shall always reside in the upper layer irrespective of any factors. Top layer क्या होता है? हम क्या बोलते हैं? That what will be the top layer? टॉप लेयर क्या होता है? टॉप लेयर जो होता है वो आइडली विल रिमेन एम्प्टी रहता है, ये तो हमने अभी पढ़ा था, which is to be filled. The layer can get populated if the Reserve Bank is of the opinion that there is a substantial increase in the potential system risk from specific NBFC in the upper layer. Such NBFC shall move to the top layer from the upper layer. Categorization of NBFC carrying out a specific activity as a regulatory structure. NBFC is scale based as well as activity based regulation. The following prescription shall apply in respect of the NBFC. NBFC P2P, this without public funds and customer interface will always remain in the base layer of the regulatory structure. फिर हम बोलते हैं HFC will be included in middle layer or the upper layer and not in the base layer. As the case may be, will remain always remain in the middle layer. The remaining NBFC investment and credit companies, microfinance institutions, NBFC factors and mortgage guarantee companies could lie in any of the layers of regulatory structure depending on the parameter of scale-based regulatory framework. Government-owned NBFC shall be placed in a base layer, middle layer, as the case may be. They will not be placed in the upper layer till further notice. All reference of NBFC shall mean NBFC base layer. All reference to NBFC-D, NBFC NDSI shall mean these as the case may be. However, existing NBFC having asset size between 500 crore and below 1000 crore, except necessarily featuring in middle layer will be known as this. उसके बाद हम क्या बोलते हैं? करंट नेट ऑन फंड कितना है? बाय 31 मार्च इतना हो गया था, एंड करंटली तो नेट ऑन फंड आईसीसी तो अभी करंटली कितना? बाय 31 मार्च 2027 इट विल बी 10 करोड़ एंड 2 करोड़ इन एनी रीजन 5 करोड़ देन विल बी 10 करोड़ 10 करोड़. डिफरेंस बिटवीन बैंक एंड एनबीएफसी में क्या डिफरेंस है? Just a minute, just a minute. So further we are discussing that what exactly the difference क्या होगा बैंक और एनबीएफसी में. तो exactly क्या difference होगा बैंक और एनबीएफसी में? एनबीएफसी लैंड एंड मेक इन्वेस्टमेंट एनहांस देयर एक्टिविटी. हम क्या बोलते हैं कि जो एनबीएफसी होता है, ब्राइटनेस बहुत ज़्यादा. डिफरेंस क्या है बैंक एंड एनबीएफसी में? एनबीएफसी लैंड करता है, मेक इन्वेस्टमेंट एनहांस देयर एक्टिविटी आर अकीन टू दैट ऑफ बैंक. हाउएवर देयर आर फ्यू डिफरेंस बिटवीन द टू एज गिवन. NBFC cannot accept demand deposit. However, NBFC can accept term deposit. NBFC जो है वो accept नहीं कर सकता है demand deposit, but NBFC जो है वो accept करता है term deposit. NBFC do not form part of payment and settlement system and cannot issue checks and loan on itself. जो भी deposit insurance facility of deposit insurance and credit guarantee corporation is not available to depositors of NBFC unlike in case of bank. उसके बाद नो मिनिमम एक्सपोजर टू प्रायोरिटी सेक्टर रिक्वायर्ड बाय एनबीएफसी. देन कम्स व्हाट विल बी द प्रूडेंशियल नॉर्म्स. प्रूडेंशियल नॉर्म्स में क्या आएगा? कैपिटल रिक्वायरमेंट. जितने भी एप्लीकेबल एनबीएफसी जो भी डिफाइंड है द मास्टर डायरेक्शन रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया नॉन बैंकिंग फाइनेंशियल कंपनी scale based regulation direction 2023 that maintain a minimum capital ratio that consisting the tier 1 and tier 2 capital which shall not be less than 15%. तो हम क्या बोलते हैं? स्केल बेस्ड रेगुलेशंस क्या है? टायर 1 टायर 2 कैपिटल क्या है? विच शैल नॉट बी लेस देन 15%, जो कि कम नहीं होना चाहिए 15% से. विच शैल नॉट बी लेस देन 15% ऑफ एग्रीगेट रिस्क वेटेड एसेट ऑन द बैलेंस शीट. of risk adjusted value of balance sheet item. Tier 1 capital in respect of NBFC except NBFC this primarily engage in lending against school salary and any point of time shall not be less than 10%. Tier 1 capital for NBFC except the base layer is the sum of own fund as reduced by investment in shares and other NBFC and in shares, debenture, bonds, outstanding loans, advances including the hire purchase and lease finance made to and deposit with subsidiaries and companies and the same group exceeding the aggregate 10% of the own fund. Perpetual debt instrument issued by the known deposit taking NBFC in each year to the extent it does not exceed 15% of the aggregate Tier 1 capital of such a company as on 31 March of the previous accounting year. हम क्या बोलते हैं इसके बाद NBFC जो base layer are not eligible to include perpetual debt instrument in their Tier 1 capital. Tier 1 capital for NBFC primarily engage in lending against gold, jewelry, such a loan comprising 50% of more of their financial assets shall maintain a minimum Tier 1 capital and 12% of aggregate risk-weighted asset of on balance sheet and of risk-adjusted value of off-balance sheet items. Then Tier 2 capital में बोल रहे हैं for NBFC except NBFC this is the sum of preference shares other than those which are compulsorily convertible into equity, revaluation reserves at discounted rate. Tier 2 capital में ये सब आएगा देखिए, जो कि हम एडवांस अकाउंट्स में एट द सी इंटरमीडिएट लेवल पे भी निकालते थे. प्रेफरेंस शेयर्स अदर देन दोज विच आर कंपल्सरली कन्वर्टेबल इनटू प्रेफरेंस शेयर्स जो कि अदर देन विच आर कन्वर्टेबल इनटू इक्विटी और रीवैल्यूएशन रिजर्व को हमें डिस्काउंट पे लेना पड़ेगा एट 55 डिस्काउंटेड एट द रेट ऑफ 55% की रेट पर. जनरल प्रोविजन में क्या आएगा इंक्लूडिंग स्टैंडर्ड एसेट लॉस रिजर्व टू द एक्सटेंट दीज आर नॉट एट्रीब्यूटेबल टू एक्चुअल डिमिनिशन इन द वैल्यू ऑफ आइडेंटिफाइबल potential loss and any specific asset are available to meet unexpected losses to the extent of 1/4 of the risky weighted asset. Hybrid debt capital instrument, subordinated debt, perpetual debt instrument issued by the known deposit taking NBFC which is in excess of qualified for Tier 1 capital. To the extent aggregate does not exceed Tier 1 capital, these are not eligible to include perpetual debt instrument in Tier 2 capital. For student may refer detailed guidelines in the appendix. Explanation in this direction, degree of credit risk expressed as a percentage weight have been assigned to balance sheet. For example, percentage weight assigned to fixed asset is 100. कैश एंड बैंक बैलेंस मतलब हम देखते हैं ना रिस्की वेटेड कैश बैलेंस में तो कोई रिस्क होती ही नहीं है, इट विल बी जीरो. हैंस द वैल्यू ऑफ ईच एसेट आइटम रिक्वायर्ड टू बी मल्टीप्लाई बाय रेलेवेंट, कितना उसका रिस्क वेट है हम उसको देखेंगे कि कितना रिस्क वेट है. risk adjusted value of asset aggregate shall be taken into account for reckoning the minimum capital ratio. The risk weighted asset shall be calculated as the weighted aggregate of the funded item as detailed thereunder. कैश तो हम क्या बोलते हैं कितना वेटेड रिस्क असेट है ऑन बैलेंस शीट आइटम में और उसका परसेंटेज ऑफ वेट क्या है. कैश एंड बैंक बैलेंस इंक्लूडिंग हम क्या बोलते हैं कैश एंड बैंक बैलेंस इंक्लूडिंग फिक्स्ड डिपॉजिट एंड सर्टिफिकेट ऑफ डिपॉजिट विद द बैंक, इट विल बी 100%. फिर इन्वेस्टमेंट अप्रूव्ड सिक्योरिटी एक्सेप्ट एट दिस बॉन्ड एट अ पब्लिक अप्रूव्ड सिक्योरिटीज में देयर इज अ वेट ऑफ approved except C, it is 0%. Then bond of public sector, it is 20%. बॉन्ड्स ऑफ, ये एनबीएफसी के चल रही है हमारा। उसके बाद फिक्स डिपॉजिट, सर्टिफिकेट ऑफ डिपॉजिट, बॉन्ड ऑफ पब्लिक फाइनेंशियल, एफडी, सर्टिफिकेट ऑफ डिपॉजिट, बॉन्ड ऑफ पब्लिक फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशन, इसमें है 100%। इसमें 100% एक ऊपर नीचे हो गया। शेयर्स ऑफ ऑल कंपनी डिबेंचर बॉन्ड कमीशन of all companies and unit of all mutual fund. All asset cover this post commercial operations COD infrastructure project in existence in a year, उसमें है 50%। करंट एंड अदर हम क्या बोलते हैं इसके बाद कि जो भी हमारा करंट एंड अदर, जो भी हमारा करंट एंड अदर current asset, other financial asset, stock on hire, it is 100%. Inter corporate loans deposit 100%. Loans advances fully secured, it is 0. Loans to staff 0. Other secured loans and advances which is considered to be good is 100%. Consumer credit exposure outstanding as well as new categorized as retail loan excluding housing loan, educational loan, vehicle loan, loan against salary and microfinance, that is 125%, credit card again 125%, bill purchase discounted 100%, others that will be 100. Fixed asset net of depreciation asset leased out 100, premises 100, furniture fixture 100. Income tax deducted at source, that is 0. Advance tax paid 0. Interest due on government 0. Others to be 100. Domestic sovereign fund based claim on central government 0. Direct loan exposure is 0. Central government guarantee claims of obviously इसमें कोई risk नहीं होगी, and state government or guarantee claims which have not remained in default, which are in default for a period of not more than 90 days, 20, that will be 20. State government guarantee claim which have remained in default for a period of more than 90, so it will be 100. देन आता है हमारा इनकम रिकॉग्निशन। इनकम रिकॉग्निशन क्या होता है, जो भी इनकम रिकॉग्निशन है उसे हम shall be based on recognized accounting principle. Income including interest, discount, higher charges, lease rental or any other charges on NPA shall be recognized only when it is actually realized. Any such income recognized before the asset become non-performing an asset and realized shall be reversed. Asset classification. The asset classification norms as given below shall apply to every applicable NBFC except the NBFC this. Every NBFC shall, after taking into account the degree of well-defined credit weakness and extent of dependence on collateral security for realization, classify its lease, hire, purchase, asset, loans and advances and any other forms of credit into the following classes, that namely the standard assets, the substandard, the doubtful and the loss asset. जो भी class of asset referred hereto above shall not be upgraded merely as a result of rescheduling unless it satisfies the condition required for the upgradation. Standard asset shall mean the asset in respect of which no default in a repayment principal or payment of interest is perceived and which does not disclose any problem of carrying more than normal risk attached to the business. Substandard, an asset which has been classified as non-performing asset for a period not exceeding, which is not exceeding 18 months except for this. Further, an asset which has been classified as non-performing asset for a period not exceeding 12 months will be considered as substandard. An asset where the terms of agreement regarding interest and order principal have been renegotiated or rescheduled or restructured after commencement of operation until the expiry of 1 year of satisfactory performance under the renegotiated, rescheduled, restructured terms, provided that the classification of infrastructure loan as a substandard shall be in accordance with the provision of this para. Scale-based regulation, directions and doubtful asset shall mean a term loan, a lease asset, a hire purchase asset, any other assets which remain a substandard asset for a period exceeding 18 months, except this, which remains substandard for a period exceeding 12 months. Loss asset, an asset which has been identified as loss asset by the NBFC as an internal external auditor or by the Reserve Bank during the inspection of the applicable NBFC to the extent it is not written off by the applicable NBFC. An asset which is adversely affected by potential threat of non-recoverability due to either erosion in the value of security or due to non-availability of security or due to any fraudulent act or omission on the part of borrower. Non-performing asset shall mean an asset in respect of which interest has remained overdue for a period of more than 180 days. A term loan inclusive of unpaid interest when the installment is overdue for a period of more than 180 days or on which interest amount remain overdue for a period of more than 180 days. A demand or call loan which remain overdue for a period of more than 180 days from the date of demand or call or on which interest amount remain overdue for a period of more than 180 days. A bill which remain overdue for a period of more than 180 days. The interest in respect of a debt or income or receivable under the had other current assets and the nature of short-term loans advances which facility remain overdue for a period of more than 180 days. Any dues on account of sale of asset or service and reimbursement of expense incurred which remain overdue for a period of more than 180 days. The lease, rental and the hire purchase installment which become overdue for a period of more than 180 days in respect of loans, advances and other credit facilities including bill purchase and discounted and the balance outstanding under the credit facilities including the accrued interest shall made available to the same borrower beneficiary when any of the above credit facility become non-performing asset, provided that in case of lease and hire purchase transaction and applicable NBFC shall classify each of such account on the basis of record of recovery. The period of more than 180 days for NPA classification as mentioned above shall be adjusted as per the eligible path outlined as under. Non-performing asset, that is the extent NPA classification norms the standard change to the overdue period of more than 90 days for applicable NBFC. A glide path is provided to applicable NBFC to adhere to the 90 days NPA norms as under. The more than 150 days overdue by 31st March 2024, more than 120 days overdue by 31st March 25, more than 90 days by 31st March 2026. The glide path will not be applicable to NBFC which are already required to follow the 90 days NPA norms. Provisioning requirement क्या है? What will be the provisioning requirement? The provisioning requirement as given below shall apply to every applicable NBFC except the NBFC. This every applicable NBFC shall, after taking into account the time lag between an account becoming non-performing, its recognition such as realization of security and the erosion over time in the value of security charge, make provision against substandard asset, doubtful asset and loss asset as provided hereunder. The provisioning requirement in respect of loans, advances and other credit facility including the bill purchase and discounted shall be considered किया जाएगा. उसके बाद लॉस असेट्स. उसके बाद हम बात कर रहे हैं अबाउट द थिंग्स दैट इज रिलेटिंग टू द लॉस असेट्स. Loss assets क्या है? The entire assets shall be written off. If the assets are permitted to remain in the books to any reason, 100% of the outstanding shall be provided for. Doubtful asset, 100% provision to the extent to which the advance is not covered by the realizable value of the security to which the applicable NBFC has a valid recovery shall be made. The realizable values to be estimated on a realistic basis. In addition to the item above, depending upon the period for which the asset has been remained doubtful, provision to the extent of 20% to 50% of the secured portion, estimated realizable value of outstanding shall be made on the following basis. So up to 1 year it is 20, then 1 to 3 it is 50 and more than 50, up to 1 year, हम क्या बोलते हैं? Up to 1 year it is 20. Up to 1 year it is 20. Then 1 to 3 it will be 30, and then more than 3 it will be 50%. Substandard asset, a general provision of 10% per outstanding shall be made. Substandard asset except the NBFC this and NBFC this. It is around, yeah. ओके तो एक बार हम थोड़ा सा दोनों रीड करते हैं चीज़ों को तो कि ताकि थोड़ा हमें क्लैरिटी आए कि ठीक है एनबीएफसी में है क्या. Standard asset provisioning except NBFC. NBFC shall make provision for standard asset at 0.25% of the outstanding which shall not be reckoned for arriving at net NPA. The provision towards a standard asset need not be netted from gross advance but shall be shown separately as contingent provision against standard asset in the balance sheet. Standard asset provisioning not applicable for this. NBFC shall make provision for standard asset at 0.40% of the outstanding which shall not be reckoned for arriving at a net NPA. The provision towards standard asset need not be netted off from the gross advance but shall be shown separately as a contingent provision against standard asset in the balance sheet. The above regulatory requirements are to be amended in a phased manner under the scale-based regulation prescribed by RBI for NBFC. Now comes what will be the audit procedures. The following are the necessary steps involved asset and carnap of business of a company. The first steps in carrying out the audit of NBFC is to scan through memorandum and article of association of companies so forth to acquaint oneself with the type of business that the company is engaged into. Normally, the memorandum of association of any company would be very wide in scope, thereby permitting to undertake a host of business activity, but companies generally land to specialize in and focus of a few select activity. An auditor should therefore make a careful study of business policy of a company so as to ascertain its principal business activity. For this purpose, an auditor may also scan through the minutes of board committee meeting and hold discussion with the top level management to ascertain the corporate business plan strategy, which would give him a clear picture as to the principal object of the company. An auditor should then independently corroborate his finding with the actual business done by the company as reflected by the company's financial assets. फिर हम बोलते हैं कि जो टास्क है ऑफ ascertaining the principal business activity of any NBFC is a paramount importance since the very classification of company as NBFC and its further classification would all depend upon its principal business activity. Based on the classification of a company, it will be required to comply with the provisions relating there to the limit on acceptance of public deposit as contained in the NBFC public deposit directions. फिर आ जाता है हमारा कि हम कैसे वैल्यूएशन करेंगे. तो ये चैप्टर तो काफी बड़ा जाने वाला है नहीं. तो इसमें टोटल 51 पेजेस है. इस पर्टिकुलर पीडीएफ में तो 51 पेजेस ही है एंड हमने उसमें से कितने पढ़ लिए हैं. तो हमने अराउंड 20 पेजेस तो पढ़ लिए हैं आउट ऑफ दिस 50 पेजेस. तो आई मे से कि बाकी भी हमें पढ़ने हैं. हम इसमें 26 अराउंड पढ़ लेते हैं, उसके बाद हम नेक्स्ट में कंटिन्यू करेंगे बिकॉज बहुत ज़्यादा तो पॉसिबल नहीं होगा. ऊपर ऊपर से रीड करते हैं कि एग्जैक्टली क्या लिखा है. अब हम बोल रहे हैं कैसे वैल्यूएशन होगा इंटरनल कंट्रोल सिस्टम का. So responsibility of maintaining an adequate accounting system incorporating various internal control to the extent appropriate to the size and nature of a business vests karega with the management. A sound internal control system would enable an organization to plug loopholes in its working, particularly in detection of fraud, and would also aid in timely decision making. An auditor should gain an understanding of the accounting system and related internal control which is adopted by NBFC to determine the nature क्या होगा, timing क्या होगा, extent क्या होगा of his audit procedures. An auditor should also ascertain whether the internal control put in place by the NBFC are adequate and are being effectively followed. In particular, an auditor should review the effectiveness of the system of recovery prevalent at the NBFC. He should ascertain whether the NBFC has an effective system of periodical review of advances in place which would facilitate effective monitoring and follow-up. The absence of periodical review system could result in non-detection of sticky advances at their very inception, which may ultimately result in NBFC having an alarmingly high level of NPA. कैसे रजिस्ट्रेशन होगा एनपीए का? तो सेक्शन 45 आई है इंसर्टेड इन दी दैट हम क्या बोलते हैं कैसे फर्दर कैसे रजिस्ट्रेशन होगा विद द आरबीआई. Section 45 IA of the inserted in the RBI Act 1934, 9 January 1997 has made it incumbent on the part of all NBFC कैसे हम comply करेंगे with the registration requirement and have a minimum net on fund of 10 crore, although the requirement of minimum net on fund present at 200 lakh यानी कि 2 crore. However, for strengthening the financial sector and technology adoption in view of the increasing complexities of a service offered by NBFC, it shall be mandatory for all the NBFC to raise the minimum net on fund to rupees 10 crore for commencing carrying on its business. An auditor should obtain a copy of the certificate of registration granted by the RBI. In case of certificate of registration has not been granted, a copy of the application form filled with the RBI for registration, it may be particularly be noted that NBFC incorporated after 9 January are not entitled to commence business without first obtaining a registration certificate from the RBI. An auditor should therefore verify whether the dual condition relating to registration with the RBI and maintenance of minimum net on fund have been duly complied with by the concerned NBFC. Every NBFC holding public deposit is required to invest a specified percentage as the RBI may specify from time to time. The RBI has also prescribed a format for reporting to ensure compliance with the requirement and maintenance of liquid asset on a quarterly. क्या पीसी की बैटरी जो है डिस्चार्ज हो रही है तो आई मे थिंक आई एम summing up the things till here only. Is required to invest in a specified percentage as the RBI may specify from time to time. The RBI has also prescribed a format for reporting to ensure compliance with the requirement of maintenance of liquid asset on a quarterly basis. The quarterly return duly signed by an officer of the NBFC is required to submit during the prescribed time limit from the end of relevant quarter with reference to investment held in approved security during the relevant quarter. The auditor should ascertain whether the investment in prescribed liquid asset have been made and whether quarterly returns mentioned have been regularly filed with the RBI by the concerned NBFC. So with this we have concluded